Seattle's rain was merciless that night. It hammered the city in silver sheets, flooding gutters and streaking down the high glass of the locked tower. From the top floor, the storm looked like static, loud, endless, impossible to shut out. Inside, Adrian Locke stood alone in his office, the glow of monitors still casting their numbers across his desk. Reports, metrics, compliance charts, every line had been scrubbed too clean, too perfect. And perfection in Adrian's world was the surest sign of a lie. He picked up his phone. His voice was flat, precise, already rehearsed. "Terminate the Tacoma manager, tomorrow. No excuses." The line clicked, a ring hummed. 2, 3, his hand tightened. Then, "Hello?" Not a professional greeting, not the clipped tone of HR, a child's voice, small, unsteady. Adrian frowned. "Who is this?" There was shuffling, the sound of fabric dragging across a floor, then a whisper that barely reached the line. "Sir? My mom's been sick for 2 days. Please, can you come help her?" The words hit harder than the rain against the glass. Behind the boy's voice came a cough, ragged and hollow, followed by the muffled sound of another child asking if it would be okay. Adrian froze. He had dialed wrong, a single digit out of place. This wasn't HR. This wasn't his problem. But he didn't hang up. "What's your name?" he asked. "Jonah," the boy said, the syllables trembling. "And your mother, where is she?" Jonah rattled off an address in a part of the city Adrian had not set foot in for years. His words tumbled over each other, desperate, like he had learned early that adults often stopped listening halfway through. "Please," Jonah added again, softer this time. Adrian's reflection stared back at him from the window. He saw his own eyes, cold and rehearsed, and behind them, a memory he'd spent half his life burying. A woman lying weak on a kitchen floor, the hum of a broken refrigerator, a phone call unanswered. His mother. Adrian slipped on his coat. He didn't say why, he didn't explain. He simply left, his footsteps echoing through the empty hall as the storm outside swallowed the city whole. The penthouse lights clicked off, the black sedan roared to life, and in the back of his mind, the wrong call kept ringing. The stairwell smelled of damp concrete and old paint. Adrian climbed quickly, his shoes echoing against the cracked walls. The address Jonah had given him led here, to a building sagging under years of neglect, where light bulbs flickered and doors carried the weight of too many stories. He reached the door marked 3B and knocked. It opened slowly. A boy stood there, hair sticking to his forehead, holding onto the frame like it was the only thing keeping him upright. His voice dropped to a whisper. "You came." Inside, 2 other boys sat on the couch, identical in their worried glances. Beyond them, Claire Bennett lay on the bed by the window, fever carving shadows under her eyes. The air smelled faintly of boiled rice left untouched. A half-empty glass of water rested on the nightstand. Adrian stepped in, shutting the door behind him. The sound of the storm dulled, though it still pressed through the thin windows. Claire stirred, forcing her eyes open. Her voice was hoarse, but steady enough to carry distrust. "Who are you?" Adrian answered plainly, his tones stripped of the corporate polish he usually wore. "A wrong number, but I heard your son, and I couldn't ignore it." She tried to push herself up, only to collapse back into the thin pillow. "We don't need handouts," she muttered, breath shallow. Adrian didn't argue. He was already dialing. "This isn't a handout. I'm calling a doctor. He'll be here within the hour." The boys watched him carefully, as if measuring whether this stranger could be trusted. One of them, Eli, the quietest, clutched his mother's hand tighter, whispering that help was finally here. When Adrian set his phone down, his eyes fell on a stack of papers scattered across the counter. He picked one up. Lines of numbers, handwritten, carefully logged, notes about cold storage failures, equipment that hadn't been repaired, safety risks flagged again and again. Adrian's grip tightened on the page. He knew these forms. They were his company's. Reports like this should have been in the system, not buried on the counter of a one-bedroom apartment. Claire noticed where his attention had gone. Her voice, weak but edged with defiance, cut through the room. "I refuse to sign off false reports. That's why I lost my job. Safer to erase me than fix the problem." Adrian set the paper down slowly, studying her. For years, he had built an empire on the belief that numbers told the truth. Yet, here was truth. Pale, feverish, still fighting, scribbled in ink by a woman his company had silenced. The knock came less than an hour later. The doctor entered with a quiet efficiency, checked Claire's vitals, left instructions and prescriptions. Adrian covered the bill before she could protest. When the door shut behind him, the apartment returned to its fragile quiet. Jonah broke it first. His voice was small but steady with hope. "Will you come back tomorrow?" Adrian looked at the three boys, then at their mother struggling to stay awake. His answer came without hesitation, yes. And as the storm outside raged on, something in him shifted. A call meant to end someone's career had instead opened a door he could not close. Back in his penthouse, the storm still raged outside. Adrian set the folded notes from Claire's kitchen counter on his desk. They looked small against the glass table, but they carried more weight than all the sanitized charts on his screens. He logged into the company's secure system. Each click opened dashboards filled with spotless numbers, performance curves that looked like they belonged in a textbook. Too perfect. He keyed in an administrator code, one almost no one else knew. The system hesitated, then revealed a hidden archive. Pages of deleted reports flashed across the screen, temperature logs, flagged safety breaches, employees' signatures that had been wiped from record, and there it was. Claire Bennett's name. Her warnings, submitted week after week, cut from the system as if she had never existed. Adrian leaned back. Hands steepled, the rain hammering harder against the glass. Someone high up had buried this. Not out of error, but with intent. He didn't need to guess long. Colin Briggs, Regional Supply Director. The man prided himself on delivering flawless numbers, flawless KPIs. Adrian had praised him more than once for his consistency. Now that consistency looked like blood on his own hands. The elevator bell rang. Adrian's chief of staff, Rena Cole, stepped in. Sharp, precise, loyal. She froze when she saw the report spread across his desk. "Where did you get those?" she asked quietly. Adrian didn't look up. "From the apartment of a woman our system erased. A woman whose son answered when I called the wrong number tonight." Rena moved closer, scanning the pages, her eyes narrowed. These logs were never supposed to vanish unless... She stopped, catching herself. "Unless someone rewrote the system," Adrian finished for her. His voice was low, but steady. "And you know who benefits?" For a long moment, the storm filled the silence. Then Rena asked the question she always asked when things turned dangerous. "What do you want to do?" Adrian closed the file, his hand firm on its cover. "I want every hidden report restored. Quietly, tonight." "And Claire Bennett?" Rena asked. Adrian paused. He remembered the look in her eyes, feverish but unbroken, as she told him she refused to sign a lie. "She stays in this," he said. "If we're going to fight this war, she's the only witness who never bent." Rena nodded once. "Then you'd better be ready. Colin doesn't lose quietly." Adrian turned back to the storm outside. He had spent years building an empire on clean numbers and controlled narratives. Tonight, a wrong number had shown him the cost of those illusions. And tomorrow, the fight would begin. Morning light crept through Seattle's skyline, but Adrian's office was already awake. The reports he'd unearthed burned like evidence on his desk. By mid-morning, Colin Briggs walked in unannounced. His suit was sharp, his smile sharper. He closed the door behind him without asking. "You've been busy," Colin said, voice smooth, practiced, "digging into files that don't concern you." Adrian didn't look up right away. When he did, his gaze was steady. Files that were deliberately erased, reports written by Claire Bennett. Colin chuckled, low and dismissive. Claire Bennett? She was a problem. Always pushing complaints, always slowing down operations. She signed her own exit when she refused to follow procedure. "She refused to lie," Adrian corrected, voice cutting through the room. Colin's eyes hardened. "You think the board cares about one former supervisor's scribbles? No. They care about performance, and I deliver it." He slid a folder across the desk. Inside were counter-reports, manufactured memos, stamped with false timestamps, all pointing to Claire as the origin of unverified claims that nearly damaged a multi-million-dollar contract. "She's unstable," Colin said calmly. "And if you protect her, you'll look unstable too. The board doesn't need a leader who chases ghosts." For a long moment, the only sound was the rain easing against the glass. Adrian studied the folder, then closed it with deliberate calm. "You built a fortress of numbers, Colin. But numbers can collapse. All it takes is one crack." Colin leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Careful, Adrian. If you push this, the board will see it as negligence. They'll come for your chair, not mine. Adrian's jaw tightened. He had built his empire on control, yet for the first time he saw how much of that empire rested on shadows Colin had drawn. When Colin left, Rena stepped in. She had overheard enough. He's setting you up. If we move too late, Claire will be destroyed first. Adrian stood, looking out at the city blurred by drizzle. His reflection looked different, less untouchable, more human. Then we don't move late, he said. We move now, and we move with her. The decision was clear. This fight would no longer stay behind polished doors. Claire would need to stand as witness, and Adrian would have to risk his empire to let her voice be heard. The following evening, Adrian found himself outside the same worn-down building. The storm had passed, but the air was still damp, carrying the smell of wet asphalt and smoke from nearby chimneys. He climbed the stairs slowly this time, rehearsing what to say. At 3B, he knocked. Jonah opened, surprise flickering in his eyes before calling to his brothers. Claire was sitting up on the couch, pale but stronger, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. She looked at him carefully. Back again? Adrian nodded. He didn't bother with small talk. Claire, what you documented, those reports, they were real. I recovered them, and the man who erased them is already moving to bury you further. Her jaw tightened. Colin Briggs, Adrian studied her. You knew. I knew he wanted silence. I didn't know he'd reach into the system itself. When I refused to sign, they made me disappear. The boys had gathered quietly, listening. Eli pressed against her side. Caleb peeked over the couch. Jonah leaned on the armrest. Their eyes followed every word. Adrian lowered his voice, steady but urgent. If this stays between us, Colin wins. I need you to testify, to show the board what you saw, what you wrote. You're the only one who can. Claire shook her head, bitter. You think they'll listen? They'll say I'm angry, vindictive, that I made it up. They already painted me as a liar. Adrian stepped closer. Then let me stand with you. Let them say what they will, but they'll have to say it while facing both of us. For a long silence, Claire looked down at her sons. Jonah finally broke it, his voice small but steady. Mom, if you don't tell them, won't more people get hurt? Her hand trembled against the blanket. She pressed it to Jonah's hair, then looked up at Adrian. I'll speak, but not because I trust your board, because my boys deserve to live in a world where truth matters. Adrian inclined his head, his expression firm. Then we fight together. The decision was sealed, not in the boardroom, but in a cramped apartment where 3 boys clung to their mother. And outside, the city lights flickered across wet pavement, as if the storm was gathering again. 2 days later, Adrian's office felt different. The same glass walls, the same city skyline, but the air was heavier. On his desk lay 2 files, one with Colin's flawless metrics, the other with Claire's handwritten notes. Claire sat across from him, her hands folded tightly. She had dressed simply, but her presence carried a quiet strength. The 3 boys were at a neighbor's for the evening. For the first time, she and Adrian had uninterrupted space to plan. Rena placed a recorder on the table. We need to capture Claire's statement word for word. Not just for the board, but in case Colin tries to twist the record. Claire's voice was steady. Do you really think they'll believe me over him? Adrian leaned forward, his tone measured. Not just believe you. They'll see the system logs. Your handwriting matched to the erased entries, and they'll see me stand beside you. That matters. Rena nodded. But Colin will play ruthless. He'll argue you fabricated these notes after being dismissed. They'll bring up your termination as proof of misconduct. Claire inhaled, then let it out slowly. Then I'll tell them the truth. That I refused to put my name on a lie. If they can't handle that, at least my boys will know I didn't bend. For a moment, the room was silent. Adrian studied her, a flicker of respect cutting through his usually guarded expression. She wasn't just a witness. She was a fighter, though she never chose this battle. He spoke softly but with weight. You shouldn't have to do this alone, and you won't. The strategy unfolded late into the night. Rena rehearsed likely questions. Adrian outlined the timeline of Colin's manipulations. Claire filled in details that only someone inside the warehouse could know. Broken sensors, falsified signatures, pallets stacked past safety lines. As the clock neared midnight, Claire's voice began to waver with fatigue. Adrian caught it first. That's enough for tonight, he said firmly. You've carried this long enough. Rest now. She looked at him, almost surprised at the gentleness in his tone. Then she gave a faint smile. I thought CEOs never slept. Adrian almost smiled back. Not when they're losing. But this time, we're not losing. Outside, the city lights shimmered against the wet pavement. Inside, for the first time, the odds felt less impossible. Tomorrow, the board would summon Colin. Soon after, it would be Claire's turn, and when that moment came, the truth would have a voice. The boardroom gleamed with polished wood and cold light. At one end of the long table sat the directors, each with tablets open, figures glowing against their faces. At the other, Adrian walked in with Claire beside him. Rena followed, her briefcase filled with documents and backups. The air tightened as Colin Briggs entered moments later. He carried confidence like armor, a smile just shy of arrogance. Shall we begin? He asked, taking his seat. The chairman gestured. Mr. Locke, you requested this hearing. Present your case. Adrian rose. His voice carried weight, calm but deliberate. This company was built on trust and safety. But our supply chain data has been falsified, reports were erased, and the one person who refused to lie was silenced. He motioned to Claire. For a heartbeat, she hesitated, then stood. Her eyes swept the room. My name is Claire Bennett. I was a safety supervisor. I was asked to sign reports that showed no violations, even when I saw broken equipment, faulty sensors, workers injured. I refused. Days later, my position disappeared from the system. My warnings, gone. Colin chuckled, leaning back. Convenient story. A disgruntled ex-employee inventing noble reasons. Do you have proof, Miss Bennett? Claire lifted the folder in her hands, pages in her handwriting, dated, signed. Rena tapped her tablet, projecting logs onto the wall, system entries with timestamps, deleted by Colin's account. The room grew still. Colin's smile faltered but returned quickly. Handwritten notes? Logs that could be doctored? This is flimsy at best. And Mr. Locke, you risk your position by parading a terminated employee into this room. That was when Adrian stepped forward, his gaze sweeping across the board. His words landed one by one, sharp and measured. I once lost my mother because someone signed off a false report. That mistake cost her life. I swore this company would never hide the truth again. If protecting perfect numbers means burying real dangers, then I would rather lose my title than my integrity. The room fell silent. Even those who had supported Colin glanced uneasily at one another. Claire's hands tightened on the folder, but her voice was steady. You can dismiss me. You can ignore what I've written. But one day, the families of injured workers will ask who looked the other way. And you'll remember this day. The chairman's eyes lingered on the evidence glowing across the wall. For the first time, Colin shifted uncomfortably. The hearing was far from over, but the tide had begun to turn. The stillness in the boardroom cracked when Colin leaned forward, his voice sharp, aimed at the directors. Let's not be blinded by sentiment, he said, eyes darting toward Claire and Adrian. Mr. Locke is willing to risk billions in contracts based on the notes of a woman dismissed years ago. If this evidence is authentic, why did she wait until now to appear? Why, conveniently when Mr. Locke's own authority is under scrutiny? Murmurs rippled across the room. The doubt Colin planted began to take root. Claire's chest tightened, but Adrian's voice cut in, steady. She waited because I didn't listen. I buried her warnings beneath numbers that looked clean. That is my failure. The question isn't why she waited. The question is why those reports had to be erased in the first place. Colin smirked, pulling a new folder from his briefcase. And yet, I have here a compliance audit, signed by external consultants, showing 0 anomalies in the last 12 months. Independent, verified, certified. He spread the pages across the table like a gambler revealing his hand. The directors leaned forward, scanning. Confidence returned to Colin's posture. So tell me, Adrian, are you saying our consultants are liars too? How far will you go to protect your pride? The tension thickened. Claire could feel the weight of every gaze. Her fingers clenched the edge of the table, knuckles white. But then Rena stepped forward, calm, measured. These audits, she tapped the header line on the projected page, enlarging it on the wall, came from a firm owned by a shell company. That shell company, she swiped again, revealing another document, is traced back to Mr. Briggs's brother-in-law. So yes, we are saying they lied, because their paycheck depended on it. The silence that followed was different, not the silence of doubt. This time, it was the silence of impact, Colin's face paled. He reached for the folder as if grabbing it back could erase what had been revealed. Adrian did not raise his voice. He only said, "This company can't afford to keep choosing comfortable lies over painful truths. Decide now. Are we led by fear of exposure or by responsibility to those who trust us?" The boardroom hung in suspense, the balance of power shifting visibly. Claire, watching from the side, realized that this wasn't just Adrian's fight anymore. It was hers too. The boardroom felt like it had shrunk. Every pair of eyes flicked between Colin's paling face and the documents on the projection screen. The silence was heavy, broken only by the low hum of the air vent. One of the senior directors, Mrs. Alvarez, folded her hands slowly. Her voice was calm but firm. "Mr. Briggs, you presented independent audits as fact. Now we learn they are linked to your family. Do you deny this connection?" Colin opened his mouth but no words came. His usual sharp confidence cracked under the weight of exposure. Adrian leaned back slightly, not triumphant but steady. "This company's integrity isn't negotiable. If numbers can be bought, then every worker, every family, depending on our safety record, is at risk. That ends tonight." Claire spoke then, her voice softer but resonant. "I never wanted to be here. I just wanted to do my job right, but if standing here means no one else has to choose between a paycheck and their conscience, then it's worth it." The boardroom stilled again, but this time it wasn't fear. It was recognition. Even those who had doubted her a moment ago now saw not just a mother of three, but a professional who had been silenced. Finally, the chairman cleared his throat. "Mr. Briggs, until this matter is fully investigated by the state, you are suspended effective immediately." Colin's chair screeched back as he stood, face red, fists clenched, but no rebuttal came. He gathered his folder with shaking hands and stormed out. The door thudded shut behind him. A wave seemed to pass through the room. People exhaled, shoulders dropped. The chairman turned to Adrian. "And you, Mr. Locke, what do you propose we build from here?" Adrian glanced at Claire, then back at the board. His answer was deliberate. "A reporting system that can't be erased, anonymous, independent, accessible to every employee, not filtered through power. And I want Ms. Bennett to lead it." The room murmured, some surprised, some approving. Claire froze, eyes widening slightly at Adrian. "You trust me with that?" she asked quietly, when the board discussion shifted into logistics. Adrian's response was simple, but his gaze steady. "You've already proven you were willing to stand alone for the truth. Imagine what you could do if the company stood with you." In that moment, Claire realized the tide had turned, not just against Colin, but for her, for Adrian, and for the future of the company. The boardroom slowly emptied, leaving only a few papers scattered across the long oak table. Outside the glass walls, Seattle's skyline glowed through the drizzle. Adrian remained by the window, hands in his pockets. Claire gathered her folder, but her voice was the one to break the quiet. "You put your career on the line tonight," she said softly. Adrian turned, his expression calm, stripped of the armor he usually wore in public. "A title means nothing if the people under it don't trust you. My mother deserved better. You deserved better. The workers deserved better. It was time." Claire studied him, then nodded as though something inside her settled. Just then, the doors swung open. Jonah, Eli, and Caleb rushed in with Rena trailing behind, apologizing for their impatience. The boys had been waiting in a side room. "Mom!" Caleb wrapped his arms around Claire. Jonah looked up at Adrian. "Did you fix it?" Adrian crouched down to their level, a rare softness in his tone. "We fixed it. But your mom was the one who stood up when it mattered." The boy's eyes widened with pride, clinging to her. For the first time, Claire didn't seem burdened by the weight of responsibility alone. The next morning, news outlets buzzed with the headline, "CEO chooses truth over power, Locke exposes internal fraud." Workers at the docks taped copies of the article to bulletin boards. For them, it wasn't about corporate drama. It was a sign that their voices might finally matter. At the small rented home, Claire poured cereal into 3 bowls. The kitchen light flickered faintly, but the boys were laughing, recounting how Adrian defeated the villain in the big meeting. She smiled, tired but lighter. A knock came at the door. Claire opened it to find Adrian, not in a suit but a simple coat, holding a bag of groceries. "I figured you could use a day off from worrying about breakfast," he said, almost awkwardly. She laughed softly. You know, CEOs don't usually do grocery runs. Maybe they should, Adrian replied. The boys swarmed him instantly, tugging at his coat, demanding he join them for pancakes. Adrian hesitated at first, then removed his coat and rolled up his sleeves. For the first time in years, he wasn't giving orders. He was simply present. The Sunday morning light filtered through Claire's kitchen window. The table was crowded with bowls, crayons, and half-eaten pancakes. Adrian sat among the boys, his sleeves rolled up, listening as Jonah explained a drawing on a napkin. A tall man holding an umbrella over 4 stick figures. "That's you," Jonah declared, pressing the napkin into Adrian's hand. Adrian looked down at the crude sketch, his voice low. "I don't think I've ever looked better." Claire, rinsing plates at the sink, turned with a small smile. It was the first time she had seen the boys invite someone into their world without hesitation. Corporate HQ, Monday. In the executive lounge, Rena handed Adrian a new draft. Independent Safety Reporting Program, Director. Claire Bennett. The board signed off, she confirmed. It launches next quarter. Adrian studied the page. For the first time, Claire's name wasn't buried in a footnote. It was printed at the top. "Make sure she has full autonomy," he said. "And flexible hours. She shouldn't have to choose between her kids and her work." Rena's eyebrows lifted. "That's very unlock of you." Adrian allowed a faint smirk. "Get used to it." Evening, Claire's apartment. Claire sat at her small desk, going through the program proposal. The boys had fallen asleep in the living room, curled against each other under a blanket. A soft knock at the door. Adrian stood there, holding not groceries this time, but a simple notebook. "I thought you'd want to see this," he said, offering it. Inside were sketches of a hotline system Adrian had once designed with his mother in mind, never built, because he had considered it too sentimental. Claire traced the old pencil lines. "You were thinking about this long before tonight." Adrian's gaze lingered on the notebook. "I was thinking about her. Now, I'm thinking about what comes next." The silence between them was no longer sharp. It was steady, like a pause before something new began. The first day Claire walked into the corporate tower as Director of Independent Safety Reporting, the lobby felt different. She wasn't arriving as a junior employee, name tag hanging loosely around her neck. She was walking in with her head lifted, 3 signatures on the board resolution behind her, and a program that bore her name. Still, eyes followed her. Some carried recognition, others skepticism. Rena met her at the elevator. "Don't expect applause," she said gently. "Most of them don't like the idea of someone outside the hierarchy holding this much authority." Claire nodded. "Good, if they're comfortable, then I'm not doing my job." Internal audit room. Claire stood before a semicircle of managers, presenting the hotline's protocols. Anonymous submissions, external review, mandatory board-level reports. One manager interrupted. "So now anyone can bypass us? We're drowning in numbers already." Claire's hands rested firmly on the folder. "The numbers don't matter if lives are at stake. Reports aren't noise, they're warnings. If you can't tell the difference, you shouldn't be in this room." The silence that followed wasn't polite. It was unsettled, but it held. From the back of the room, Adrian watched quietly. He hadn't announced his presence, hadn't spoken for her. He simply leaned against the glass wall, letting her claim the ground as her own. Evening, Claire's apartment. The boys were at the table drawing again when Claire returned. Adrian was already there, tie loosened, listening as Caleb recited a joke he had written on a scrap of paper. Claire set down her bag, sinking into the chair beside them. Her face was tired but bright. "They didn't make it easy," she admitted. Adrian passed her a glass of water. "They weren't supposed to. Change never comes easy in that building." She looked at him, the gratitude quiet but steady. "I held the room today. Not because you stepped in, because you didn't." Adrian's reply was simple, almost a vow. "It's your fight. I'm just here to make sure no one steals the ground under you." The rain had eased into a mist the evening now. Adrian and Claire stood outside the corporate tower together. She was clutching the umbrella he had given her days earlier, but neither of them opened it. They simply stood there, letting the drizzle settle softly across their shoulders. Claire broke the silence first. "You could have stepped in today." "I could have," Adrian said, "but then the victory wouldn't have been yours. And it needed to be." Her smile was faint but steady. "You're learning." He laughed quietly, almost surprised by himself. "So are you." Claire's apartment. Later that week, Adrian sat at the worn kitchen table while Jonah leaned against his arm, showing him a drawing. 3 stick figures stood beside a taller one, all holding hands. Above them, in a child's uneven scrawl, "Not alone anymore." Adrian stared at it for a long time, unable to speak. His throat tightened in a way no bored confrontation had ever caused. "Is that me?" he asked finally. Jonah nodded. "You don't have to be in a suit all the time. You can just be here." For the first time in years, Adrian felt what it meant to belong to something beyond himself. Spring in Seattle. Months passed. The hotline Claire managed had already intercepted 2 critical safety breaches. For the first time in a decade, incident rates fell below target, not because the numbers were manipulated, but because problems were actually fixed. At home, Sunday mornings became ritual. Pancakes on the stove, the boys arguing over chocolate chips versus blueberries, Adrian flipping them with the seriousness of a board presentation. Claire would laugh from the counter, coffee mug in hand, watching a man who once ruled from glass towers now fighting over syrup portions with 3 8-year-olds. The evening of change. One evening, after the boys had finally fallen asleep, Claire stepped onto the balcony with Adrian. The city glittered beyond, but the quiet between them was deeper than the skyline. She spoke softly. "I spent years telling myself I only needed to be strong for them, that if I held everything together that would be enough. But lately, I think they don't just need strong, they need steady, and so do I." Adrian reached for her hand, not rushed, not rehearsed, simply a choice. "Then let me be steady with you." Her eyes glistened, but she didn't look away. She squeezed his hand back. "No boardroom speeches, no contracts, just this." "Just this," he said. 1 year later. A bright spring afternoon, the camera tracks from a corporate plaque, Independent Safety Office, Director Claire Bennett, to a park near the bay. Adrian is lying on the grass, jacket folded as a pillow, while the boys chase each other with paper airplanes. Claire sits beside him, leaning lightly against his shoulder. Jonah's paper plane lands short. Adrian rises, walks over and shows him how to adjust the wings. The boy nods, tosses it again, this time it soars. Claire watches, her smile quiet but full. She whispers, almost to herself, "That call was never a mistake." Adrian glances back, catching her words. He says nothing, only wraps his arm around her as the camera pans upward. 3 boys running, a mother and a man who finally learned to be steady, framed beneath a clear Seattle sky. Thank you for staying with us until the very end of this story. A reminder that even a wrong number can change a life forever. If this touched your heart, please give it a like, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel. More powerful, emotional stories are waiting for you every single day.